Hey, Shawn, how the hell are you?
Hey,
You
how
doing
are
good?
you?
Excellent,
You
man.
caught,
Excellent.
you caught me painting.
I know. So, right. So he's not jerking off. You're going to see him move his hands around in the bottom, but he's painting while doing the podcast. So everything is good. Um,
Well, thanks for having me, brother. I'm excited.
hey, me too. Thank you so much for doing this. And again, this is a little late for me. So if I start fumbling or whatever, I'm like, hey, whatever. It's just part
I'm
of.
2 hours away from my normal bedtime as well.
Yeah, exactly, exactly. So, let's start off with something really simple. I mean, what is mythological horses?
Oh shit. Okay. Mythological Horses is a band I started at 14 years old,
Hmm.
and now I'm 42 or 43. I just turned 42 or 43 the other day. I was born in
Nice.
a hippie commune, so my parents waited to get my birth certificate, and my dad says I'm 1 year, and my mother says I'm the other year.
Hmm.
But basically, just a young punk rock band in Anchorage, Alaska, at like 14, 15. And we were like playing coffee shows and shit like that.
Right.
And then, um, and then we just transversed over the years of pushing like 200 shows a year for like 10 years straight, and like not having a home, and
That's
uh,
aggressive.
uh, you know, defining homelessness in a different way.
Hmm. Yeah, absolutely, absolutely.
But yeah, Mythological Horses is it's a science experiment from a teenage years. Simple,
All right, so
simple,
you're 25 plus
simple
years
and
into
social.
it though, right?
Yeah. It's
So
we're
here's the
like
question.
3,000 shows or some shit like that.
That's crazy. That's actually
That's
really crazy.
yeah.
Um, so here's the question that I ask, every single musician that I have on. When is the last time you had a quote real job, or do you have a real job? Like, I mean, is this all you do? Like, you focus entirely on the music, or?
Yeah. Well, okay, so that's a really great question. We were about to go on tour,
Hmm.
and then the pandemic happened,
Right.
and I live here in Maui, Hawaii, in a beachfront condo complex, and I was stuck here, and so I got to be able to become pool boy,
Hmm.
and so it's my first real job.
Right.
It's the first time I've had health insurance in my life, and I have epilepsy,
Hmm.
and so basically I wake up, I clean the pool,
Hmm.
and that's about it. But the last time we were on tour for shit years, and I got stuck in Anchorage, Alaska, and I was trying to. We were in between tours for like 3 months during the winter, and I was trying to get a job, just dishwashing or something. And I was filling out all the applications at all these this bullshit restaurants, and it was like, "What are your references?" And I'm just, or "What's your last job?" And I'm just like, Hovercraft Records, and then they're like, "What are your or whatever references?" And so I put my Wikipedia page to a Mythological Horses,
Hmm.
and like everybody would just look at it, and they would just like laugh at me and look at me, and like I remember after like I was walking through Anchorage, Alaska, I was walking this whole strip of Spenard Road, and I think I had put in like 20 applications up the whole road, and the last people just like laughed at me, and I went out to the parking lot and I dropped to my knees and I just started yelling, "Fuck you, rock and roll! Fuck you!"
I love it.
So I'm sure they're glad they didn't hire me,
Right.
but it's kind of one of those things of like I have actively been working my ass off for 20 years.
Right.
But like, what the fuck is my resume other
Right.
than music? You know,
Yeah.
so people don't understand that part.
Well,
But that's
it's
a
fun.
great question.
It's funny. I was talking with one of your current bandmates, Kurt Danielson, earlier today, actually, and it reminded me, like, when I first met him, he was working at a, I think it was a feed store in like Mount Vernon. Like that
Right?
was his job. It was hysterical, right? Because I didn't expect that at all. And he was like, "Well, I can't do this because I have to work." And I was like, "Well, what do you do for work?" And it was like, "Oh, I work for this." I think it was a feed store. It's something like that. Some little store in like Mount Vernon or somewhere like up north. So it's hey,
Rock
everyone
and
has.
roll, rock and roll don't pay the bills.
No, 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 it doesn't. It doesn't.
Rock and roll is a rich kid sport.
Okay, well, I'll take that. Yeah, I'll give you that. I'll give you that. So let's get back to mythological horses a little bit, right? So you recently, in the last couple of years anyway, managed to get some like Seattle luminaries, so to speak, like to join your band and talk about that. Like, how did that happen? What's the little story behind that?
Your marijuana, sir.
Oh, thank you.
Perfect.
You're excused, Just.
Your butler has arrived with your marijuana. It's all good.
Drummer. How I got involved with Tad was, shit. So I was on tour and really long tour and had a bunch of epileptic seizures. Got put in the hospital for a while, and then I woke up out of a coma, and my girlfriend of the other band who I was touring with and all my bandmates were not in the hospital. And I was like, "Where is everybody at?" And the nurses are like, "They're not here anymore. They left you."
Oh,
And
man.
so came out of this like epileptic coma, and a week later I got signed to Hovercraft Records, and and they're like, okay, so we'll give you $500 to put out a tape.
Right.
And I was like, that's not going to work. I need at least $5,000 to put out a record.
Mm-hmm.
And over a beer, it was like, it was interesting how if you just play ball, sometimes the ball will strike back. But so I had to look for a way to like, in my mind, it was a hipster label that was all like DIY and everybody's, just like the Portland hipster DIY, don't give a fuck about shit.
Mm-hmm.
And like I wanted to elevate the band to like next level of like a more professional sound. So I'd seen an interview that Tad Doyle had a studio. And so I contacted him and I was like, "Hey man, could you make my really pussy songs sound more heavy?"
Right.
And he wrote me, and he's like, "Sure." And so, so then I started working with Tad, and then 2 albums later, he's like, "All right, bro, you need a real bass player." And I was like, I don't know any real bass players. So I was thinking about Tad, and I was looking at the 8-Way Santa album. And so I emailed Kurt Danielson, and I said, "Hey, listen, Tad says I have to have a real bass player. I fucking need you." And so, of course, he was like, "Well, I have as many things to do, but yeah, I'll do it." So it's kind of one of those things. And then same thing with Kurt Block, but like Kurt Block, I was just like wrote him, and I was like, "Listen, motherfucker, you're being drafted into Mythological Horses." And he's like, "Word."
I love it.
So,
I love it.
So then I went out to the living room and I told my wife that I was like, "Hey, I got Kurt Danielson and Kurt Block in my band." And she's like, "Well, you should probably write the record now." And I was like,
Right.
"Fuck."
That's a good idea. It's a good idea. Yeah. And Kurt, I mean, God, I love the guy so much. Danielson. That would have been right about the time that he was unceremoniously ejected from Scott Grows Mary. So yeah, that was probably a good time for him to join up with the band too.
Oh yeah, and you were a management for that for a little while, right?
I played a manager for a brief amount of time.
Right.
I'm not good at that. I mean, honestly, I'm just not. Like, I'm good at putting things together, but the minutia involved in like managing bands is a lot of work for very little payoff, right?
Yeah.
So it didn't turn out super well, but anyway, I do love Kurt. I think he's a great guy, and he did finally get back to me, by the way, just earlier today.
Oh, is he gonna work?
Yeah, so hopefully I'll have him on in the next couple of weeks.
No.
Because he has some great stories, man. Some great stories. And I of course, I'm going to ask him about his book. Hopefully, he had a couple of books in the works a few years ago, so hopefully at least one of them is close to being done. So, mythological horses. So, where did the name come from? That to me is a really interesting one, because there are, I have a couple of theories, but I'd actually, obviously I want to hear what you have to say about that.
I would like to hear your number one theory.
Um, there's a oh my god, I don't have it in front of me right now, but there's a there literally is a mythological horse from Greek mythology called oh my god, I should know this since I classics was my major. Holio Grappus or something like that. Anyway, that was the only thing that I came up with, really. Other than that, I think it's sort of whimsical, right? I mean, it sounds very whimsical.
Yeah, it's very Ghostbusters. It's very. So I put out a bunch of solo albums when I was younger, a bunch of anti-folk albums. It was underneath the moniker Shawn Holley, and the show started getting bigger, and we had more people at the shows, and then we started having more band members. So then I had like an entire band on stage with me, and I got off the stage, and I was like, "Thanks, we're Shawn Holley," and I was like, "That don't make sense.
Right?
That's way too narcissistic." Like if you're gonna, I don't know. I mean, I'm not gonna get into it, but so we sat around a table in West Seattle 15 years ago or so, and everybody wrote names on the table,
Mm-hmm.
and one said mythological horses, and I was like, that's pretty cool because it's kind of like Bigfoot or something that you don't know if it really exists or not.
Right? I'm sorry, what the fuck are you doing? You're taping paint rollers to your fingers.
Yeah, I'm just working on art right now.
Okay, no, that's fine. I was just curious. Like I've never seen somebody do that before, so I had to ask.
I've never done it before, so we're gonna see what happens.
Oh, this is fun. This is fun. So a real time, demo of taping paint rollers to your hands. It'll be fun. Yeah, absolutely. All right, so mythological horses. So
All right.
so somebody came up with the name, but what was the like? Was there any meaning behind it, or was it just kind of a random name that somebody came up with?
Well, Mythological Horses over the years has had, I think, 43 band members,
Oh Jesus!
and 5 of them are dead. And most everybody just wasn't able to handle pushing 200 shows a year, and that's understandable. But
Right.
but for the past like I think 7 years now, it's just been me and Jest primarily as a 2-piece,
Mm-hmm.
and then we have the other boys that come in and help us out and make us sound good.
Right.
But
So when you play live, though, like so you've got a show coming up in like a week, right? 2 weeks, whatever.
yeah.
How do you do those shows? Is it just you and Jest when you do it, or do you bring other musicians in? Because I'm pretty sure Kurt and Tad aren't flying out to
No.
be with you.
No. Mythological Horses is just basically me and Jest.
Right.
It's just a therapy band, and so it's just the root core is just guitar and drums.
Mm-hmm.
Like Godhead Silo was just
Right. Yeah.
like bass and drums, but super loud guitar and drums. And then when we're able to be graced with the holiness of rock and roll, then the boys come in and help us out and make us sound better.
Okay. So
for the
primarily.
most part, two-piece band.
Okay. So live your 2 pieces always, right? Is that kind of accurate?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So, but okay. So here's a question. So like when you come through Seattle, so you play, Seattle and Portland or whatever.
Right.
Are those boys going to join with you, or is you still like a 2-piece at that point?
Yeah, no, like when we come home to Seattle and stuff, like the boys are like on stage with us and stuff.
Okay.
But so it's more regional, because like we live in Maui, Hawaii, and like me and Jess live in Hawaii now, and then the boys are over there. So it's like, but like Danielson can't like tour, and Block has like his
Right.
multiple other bands and stuff.
Right.
And, so
that's really interesting, though. I mean, do you run into situations where you're on the road and you play a show and people show up and they're like, "Hey, where is whomever?" Right? and they show up in just like two piece. Like, do you have adverse reactions, or are people excited about that?
Yeah, a good one was we played a college show in Arcata, California, a few years ago, and this guy shows up, and so just my drummer used to be in the band called the Moldy Peaches,
Right.
and they're a New York anti-folk outfit, originally
Mm-hmm.
from Port Townsend, Washington. And I remember this guy being like, pulling up like the Moldy Peaches Wikipedia page and being like, I don't see the drummer here. And I was like, and I was on tour and had been drinking, and I was like, you should look a little harder, motherfucker. And then he
Right.
like pulled his face away from the phone, and his eyes were like completely like super cross-eyed. And I felt really bad. And I was just like, oh, shit.
That's hysterical. It's hysterical.
Yeah.
Yeah, my
Stuff like that. But people come out to see Jest, you know, and that's funny. And then Seattle, you know, Seattle lights, but nobody gives a fuck about me.
Well, I mean, listen. So you've done some really interesting stuff, and honestly, I mean, we're gonna get into that stuff because I think I'm just gonna let you kind of go stream of consciousness for a little bit. But you've done a lot of really interesting shit, right? In regards to especially the moxie to bring people into the fold, right, of what you're doing. And you and I are kind of kindred spirits in that way. Like I'm very good at bringing just people like, hey, I really respect you. You want to be on my podcast? Sure. You know, it's like, whatever. So in a lot of cases, all it takes is just that reaching out to people, you know, like, hey.
Well, you know, 99% of success is showing the fuck up. And then Nardwar did a good talk at South by Southwest years ago, just saying it's the power of asking, or the power, you know, of just like connecting with people and just saying, hey, I'm this person, I'm nobody. You want to hang out? You want to do something?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, so one of the interesting things I had with the Eddie Spaghetti podcast is, you know, when he was talking about like, you know, meeting up with, you know, and becoming friends with like Willie Nelson and you know Steve Earle and people like that. I got a
Willie Nelson story, but keep going.
No, of course I want to hear it, but just very briefly, like his whole thing was, you know, hey, when it comes down to it, he's just a normal guy who like just wanted to hang out and talk to people, you know, and like of course, you know, but it's hard to think that way when you see somebody like up on stage. Willie Nelson.
Who Willie?
Yeah, Willie.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, Steven Tyler is my neighbor. Well, in my neighborhood.
Oh, that's fun. Yeah, good.
So, and super sweetheart, but you meet people that are just like super fucking genuine and super.
Right. Yeah, I mean, as much as I dislike Aerosmith, I do respect them a lot, right? Especially you know him and Joe, right? I mean, like, yeah, fuck. I mean, who else has done this shit for like you know almost 50 years? Right? And still sell out arenas. Like, great. I mean, you can't deny that level of success, right? And whatever. So let's hear your Willie story because I love the guy. So I'd love to hear anything.
I got
about
a Willie story. Okay. So I was traveling in the mid '90s. No, late 90s? No, early 2000s. And
You need a lighter. All right, so the guest has gone off camera to get a lighter to smoke his weed. This is fun. Oh, here it comes. Oh, good.
Intermission. So I was traveling on a Greyhound bus from Riverside, California to Las Vegas. And I was dope sick at the time. And I was just in my early 20s and stuff. I've been clean off drugs for 19, 20 years now or something. And so I'm sitting on this bus and we get like through like in Palm Springs area. maybe Barstow or not Barstow, but on the way to Vegas, and this hippie gets on the bus with a guitar, and I'm sitting there with my guitar and my backpack in my seat in like crowded bus, and it's like one seat open next to me. I'm just like, please don't let this fucking hippie sit next to me. Please don't let this fucking hippie sit next to me. Fucking hippie sits next to me.
Oh no.
And just chatting my ear off like the whole way to like Vegas, maybe 3 hours or so. And and I was the way I was funding my tours at the time is I was taking California weed and taking it to New Mexico and selling it for double price.
Oh yeah, of course.
And then being able to fund traveling for my tours. And then so we pull into Vegas, and the Las Vegas sheriffs with all their yellow polo shirts have all these like stretch out, fold out tables next to the Greyhound buses as we roll in, and they're searching everybody's backpacks and shit for drugs.
Oh God.
And I'm sitting there like, fuck, I got a quarter pound of weed in my backpack.
Oh.
And so it's still about like, sorry, my rabbit. Get out of there. Oh. So, I figure out like maybe like 15 minutes, 20 minutes out of Vegas that it's Willie Nelson sitting next to me.
Oh my God, that's hysterical.
Yeah, and I was like the whole time, and so we pull in, and I look at him, and I'm like, yo, I've got a quarter pound of weed in my backpack. And he's like, hold your guitar and he said, hold your guitar and hold my guitar and just stick next to me. And so as we got off the bus with Willie, and mind you, he has his own buses and stuff, so I think he like maybe just took the Greyhound from one destination to another just to try to be real or something for a second.
Yeah, sure.
For 3 hours with me. And so we get off the bus, and I'm holding his guitar, I'm holding my guitar, I have my backpack of weed, and all the Las Vegas sheriffs surround us. And they're like, oh, Willie, can we get an autograph? Can we get an autograph? And everybody's like taking selfies and like autographs and shit. And I'm just sitting there like holding his guitar, holding my guitar, backpack full of weed, just glowing. And then he took his guitar, and I was like, thanks, bro. And I just like beeline for my next bus to get over to New Mexico.
That's hysterical. Absolutely hysterical. Yeah, I mean, he's pretty well known for his weed consumption, so that doesn't surprise me at all. I mean, he probably had his own half pound somewhere in his, probably in his guitar, right? The guitar he gave, like, hey, just, hold this. I'm like, yeah, sure. Yeah, so you talk a lot about addiction, right? Which I think is really interesting, because a lot of people don't talk about their addictions. Like I'm very open about mine, or what used to be addictions. I mean, well,
we are a band of addiction.
Yeah. Okay. So there was an interview I just read, really briefly, like maybe an hour ago, with you, where you said like, hey, and I don't know how old it was. There was no dateline on it, but it was like, yeah. I wake up every morning, and I basically, smoke a bunch of weed. My drummer drinks a bunch, like whatever. And you were just very, very, very honest about, like the addiction and whatnot. Does that drive you at some level? I mean, is that kind of a foundation of Mythological Horses?
Yeah, it's the complete foundation of Mythological Horses, from being 14 years old, chemically dependent. So I grew up in the NA program. My mom was a midwife and my father was a biker. I grew up in the NA program, AA program, but as our parents were inside the meetings, the kids would be outside in the parking lot smoking joints of the parents' stashes and stuff. So all of us NA kids, as our parents were getting sober, we were all trying drugs for our first time. Like I remember me being the one on like 5 hits of LSD at 13, being selected to go in and get a 2 cups of coffee from the meeting while it's going on, and I'm just like 13, like tripping.
Oh my God.
Walking, get like 2 cups of coffee to take out to the kids on the parking lot.
That's
So
crazy.
uh, no, Mythological Horses is a band of rejects and ferals. I grew up in Anchorage, Alaska, where all the kids are extremely, extremely feral, or
Right.
my group of kids. And so yeah, Mythological Horses is just a band of misfits, a band of feral kids.
Hmm.
And then finally at like 43, I'm just starting to understand my Peter Pan syndrome,
Right.
but still getting there.
Well, look, I'm about to turn 50, and I still haven't figured out my Peter Pan syndrome. So I'm right there with you. You know, I,
It's like Mythological Horses is like Beavis and Butthead. I mean,
that's interesting.
trying to grow up.
So, all right. So your music is really interesting to me, right? So I haven't listened to a huge amount of it, like maybe an hour or so out of your entire output.
Thanks
Maybe
for
a little
taking
bit.
an hour out of your life to listen to my fucked up music.
No, no, no. I mean, I've listened to more than an hour, but I've only probably listened to an hour worth of songs, right? If that makes sense. So
Okay,
I've
okay.
listened to a couple of times, right? Um, the thing is, it's quirky, but it's not funny, right? So I was trying to. One of the things I like to do is try to figure out like genres and comparisons and
I'll,
whatnot.
I'll take you right now.
Okay, good.
When I was a young kid and 14, 15, my first band at 15, well, Mythological Horses, and then and then when we had our first lineup at 15, um, teenage kids, my bass player hung himself with an extension cord in the garage as we took a break to eat like cereal and smoke pot.
Holy shit!
Teenage band, so it's like welcome to rock and roll.
Wow.
But a lot of my friends were into like the Misfits and like what I projected in my mind at the time as like heavier rock and roll or
Hmm.
heavier punk rock that kind of scared me. I was really into the Dead Milkmen. Like the Dead
Right.
Milkmen is kind of like the Dead Milkmen and Sonic Youth are kind of like the foundation of what Mythological Horses is and came to be because the Dead Milkmen were punk, catchy, satirical, and not macho, not abrasive, not you know.
Yeah. Okay. So I hear that, but lyrically, so I also love the Dead Milkmen a lot, but they're funny, right? Like they at least the majority of their songs are funny, right? They're like they
Right.
might be giants, right? Like yeah, musically they're really good, but the lyrics are funny and they're meant to be funny, right? Your lyrics aren't necessarily funny. Some of them
No,
are, but they're
no.
not funny. So you've got that quirkiness, but you also have kind of a seriousness, right? That and to be honest, it's a little disarming sometimes, right? Because you've got this sort of like very quirky music going on.
What does the word disarming mean?
It it kind of
I dropped out in sixth grade.
oh okay, no, that's fine. Disarming basically means it kind of takes me back. Like it's hard to really understand what's going on, right? And that's not the real definition, but that's as close as I'm going to get at 10 o'clock at night my time. um, it's basically it's yeah it doesn't jive necessarily, and but that's not a bad thing, right? Because you've got this kind of like your voice is very quirky, right? You're
Yeah, I got this. It's prepubescent.
yeah I actually I saw that I was going to bring that up at some point because I thought that was really funny. And the same review that you were talking about the other thing we were just talking about. Um, but yeah, so it's a little almost disturbing, Sean. Like I mean, honestly, let me just say that it's almost disturbing, but in a good
Thanks.
way, right? I mean, if that makes any sense, right? Because you've got music that is whimsical. How's that? Whimsical is probably the best word I can come up with for that, right? It's
Right.
sort of like almost like a Disney movie, you know, where you and I mean, and look at you, like where we're talking while we're talking, and you're
Well,
You,
My
you know,
life is my life is like the Forrest Gump on LSD.
well, I mean, there's nothing wrong with that, but I am a little concerned watching you put on that surgical glove. But luckily, I'm 2,000 miles away. So, how would you describe the music? I mean, honestly, like, I've been trying, but I can't.
It, I used to write a lot of lyrics that kind of put my soul, you know, out on the shelf. But basically, the truth is that all of these songs are just songs about animals, and they sound like love songs, but they're not.
Well, okay, so that's really interesting. And getting back to your partner in crime, Jest. I had never heard of the Moldy Peaches at all until my second wife, her daughter, played a song for me, and I was like, oh my god, this is actually really good, right? I mean, and again, quirky. Again, quirky is probably the best word I have for any of this, right? Like, I mean, but it was lyrically, and I forget the name of the song now, but it was kind of a love song, but not really.
Quirky is better than sucks.
Well, no, I would never say that. Like, honestly, you wouldn't be on the fucking show if I thought you sucked. I mean, actually, that's not true. I've had people on, or I have people coming up that. Actually, I should shut up. Um, no, and I don't. I'm being facetious, right? I mean, like, I really don't think anybody that I've had on sucks, or anyone I have coming on sucks. That was me being
It's
quirky.
the music is weird and dark because I grew up in a really weird and dark place.
Right. So one of the things I kind of want to get into here is you make these like epic fucking Facebook posts that sometimes are pages long about some experiences that you've had, and I would really like to dig into some of those. Right. I mean, just some of your random stories, whether they're dark or not, because most of the ones that you tend to post are pretty fucking dark. Um, like
I'm not always dark.
no, but a lot of the things that you nice. I like that. Nice. So it's a that's nice, and that was all done with finger paints. Or, well, whatever rollers attached to your fingers. I like that. That's nice. So there was one that you posted about a good friend of yours, and like, forgive me, my memory is kind of shot right now, but you showing up at a friend's house and like they had like shot themselves or whatever, and then you said, well, this is when the first time this has happened to me. Like, can you give me a little background on yourself? Like, I mean, why do these
Yeah.
things keep
So,
happening to you? Right? I mean, really, that's what I'm trying to get at. Like, what world do you live in which these things are like fairly commonplace?
hmm. It's weird because that reference to my friend getting shot was it was these weird blocks too because like I went back to that and that happened in Anchorage, Alaska,
Mm-hmm.
and these blocks in my mind. And so we were on tour there like maybe 10 years ago, and I drove past the apartment building and I remembered it for the first time, which was pretty
Mm-hmm.
weird. But oh yeah, that story is like pretty simple. It's like lock up your fucking guns. Don't let your kids fucking play with guns. Like
Right.
it was like the classic PSA afternoon commercial of four skater kids at 14 smoke passing around a joint in a bedroom, and then the one kid pulling out a 357 be like, check out my dad's gun,
Oh
and like
God.
hands it to my friend, and the kid like hands it point and blank and like shoots him point and blank, and then like I'm holding the kid who's my best friend, and like I'm yelling for his parents, and the parents are just like going into shock, and I'm like, fucking call 911.
Right.
And but and then and so when the cops released me, my grandma was covered in blood, and that was weird too because I got in the car and it was NPR, and Nirvana was playing on NPR because my grandma was listening to NPR, and I was like, "Are they playing Heart Shaped Box?" And they're like, "Kurt Cobain, 27." I was like, "Whoa, heavy day for everybody."
Oh, it was the same day.
Not a fun day for everybody.
Wow.
Well, that's news release because
Right.
Cobain had died a few days before, probably. But I mean, and it's shit like that, and then I was just like in and out of juvenile hall and all that kind of stuff. Just your normal teenager that ate way too much LSD. And
Right.
like on the FBI's most wanted list in Alaska when you're 16, and like
Okay, you can't just throw that out
and then
without
somehow,
getting into it.
and then somehow being in a functional band at 40 or something.
Okay, so
Most
Shawn,
of my friends are dead or in.
You can't throw out being on the FBI's most wanted list and just walk away from that. So you have to explain a little bit about that. Just even a couple of sentences, man.
Yeah, I started a joke, silly skateboard gang when I was younger, when I was 15, and it kind of got out of hand. And then there was like murders and all this kind of shit with all these other kids, and then we were running LSD from the Bay Area up to Alaska in our teenage years, and then everybody was doing all this fucked up shit, and I was like, I'm gonna become an art thief, and so I started stealing hand-numbered Bev Doolittle prints, which was Alaska artist,
Right.
and I would try to, and I would sell those off, and I went to a pawn shop like 15, 16, and had this guy outside, and I was like, "Hey, can you take this art in? Can you go try to sell it?"
Mm-hmm.
The people inside, they're like, "Oh, this is obviously stolen." Cop car shows up. It's middle of winter. Cop leaves his car running, goes inside, starts talking to the dude. I'm just like, "Oh, I'm fucked." I get in the cop car. I take off. I'm going to ditch it just maybe a block away.
Right.
Already another cop flips his lights on. Blah, blah, blah. High-speed chase. Somehow the cops blocked off the exits to the highway in Alaska, and then I somehow ran onto the Air Force Army base, and the gate was open because some car had just gone through, and then the MPs shot out my tires, within a half mile or something, and then stuff like that, and then I escaped like a maximum security prison. That's a whole other story, but that's why I was put on the FBI wanted list.
Right.
And my involvement of running a joke skateboard gang, something like that.
Did you spend time in adult prison ever?
If that's too criminally.
Oh no, I think that's
on me. Just please edit that whole part out.
No. Actually, I like it. So, and this is kind of what I do is I like to get people to talk about weird fucking shit. So, have you been in trouble with the law in your adult life or?
No.
Okay, I'm seeing the answer is yes.
I dealt with so much of it as a fucking kid that I was just like, I'm never gonna do this again. Like I set goals. Like my whole life has just been setting goals of like, that's unacceptable. I'm not gonna fucking do that again.
Mm-hmm.
Just like dismissing it from my life and shit. Like I haven't talked to my family in like 5 years because they're just like negative energy. And like I love people, but it's like life is short. I just can't.
Oh, I'm trust me, I'm right there with you. I talk basically as necessary to people. And actually not as necessary, more of when I want to. How's that? Right? So I don't feel constrained by the social, like mores of like, hey, this is what you should do or not do. Right? And so I'm just like, hey, if I feel like doing it, I'm going to do it. But I'm not going to like, I don't know, celebrate some weird holiday just because you're supposed to. Right? Or things like that. So, Shawn, I want to hear more stories, right? So, and not necessarily dark ones, funny ones. Like, actually, and I'll start. Okay, so like 3 or 4 weeks ago, I randomly, long story, but I ended up doing acid for the first time in like 25 years.
Oh, heavy. Be careful of that.
Oh, well, I'm never going to do it again. I realized after doing it. Um, so, and I used to buy by the sheet, right? I mean, like I'd buy like a sheet and do, a quarter of it at a time. Like, I mean, I did a lot, every time
Yeah.
but I did like 4 hits and I was a fucking vegetable for 18 hours and I hated it. Like, it was the worst experience of my life,
Just
right?
recently.
Just recently, yeah, like 3 weeks ago, 4 weeks ago. And I vowed, like, no fucking way am I ever going to do that shit again, right? And I'm going to stick to that because honestly, it sucked. Like, it was not a pleasant experience at all.
Time and place for everything, especially hallucinogens.
Yeah, yeah, and I think talking to a couple of friends actually, and it's like, yeah, that stuff is fine when like you're in your early 20s or whatever, right? Because your body bounces back, and whatever, and your mind bounces back. But in my late 40s, that did not work at all. I mean, it fucking sucked. I was so miserable.
Yeah, it's all about where you're at in your mind. And also,
Yeah.
LSD these days, or it's not really like real LSD. It's like so many different compounds and shit.
Well, yeah.
You
So
gotta do like the pure Molly.
there was a period in Seattle I remember really well that like you mentioned, Molly or MDMA or whatever, but there was a huge period where that was primarily, it was like LSD and heroin. Like, people would just mix those two together and call it Molly, right? And that shit was evil. I mean, it was so evil. You
Well,
know,
do you
and
remember fucking? Do you remember fucking motherfuckers would have fucking just pre-rigged fucking full fucking heroin rigs and call them like space needles and sell them on the streets?
I do. So I'm really lucky. I didn't like heroin. I did it a couple of times, didn't like it. Very lucky. It to be honest, a friend of mine described it the best ever. He's like, it makes you feel like your head is like humongous and you're in a Looney Tunes cartoon, right? Like the first time you do it, like as soon as that shot hits your body, it's a weird experience, right?
Yeah,
And I don't mind opiates. Like, I mean, I have some oxycodone that I take every once in a while to sleep or whatever, but it's not recreational, right? Like, doing that
yeah.
shit recreationally, it just never really jibed with me. And I guess I'm
Well,
lucky that way.
I'm a recovering junkie, and like to the point where I have like a needle in my ear before I like walk in the store, and my cousin be like, "Yo, take the needle." I'd be like, "Oh shit."
Mm.
Um, but like, yeah, like opiates are like a really slippery slope
Yeah,
for
they
a lot
are
of people.
very much so.
Um,
And my drug of choice was, I loved my uppers, right? So a lot of meth and a lot of coke and whatever.
yeah,
And I found that pretty easy to walk away from. It was weird. Like, I was really deep in, and then one day I just woke up and said, nope. And it was weird. Like, I didn't plan on it. I got
yeah.
really, really, really sick, and that was it. I was like, nope, I'm done.
It's interesting seeing different kids getting addicted to different drugs. You're like your ADHD and like meth and cocaine hypersensitive kids, and then your kids that are fully into opiates and shit. And yeah, it's I used to shoot a lot of meth, shoot meth, and shoot heroin, and lived out in the desert. And how I stopped smoking, how I stopped doing meth is I was living out in New Mexico, and we were going out into the desert, building a small little bonfire every night, and I was hopping trains back and forth across the United States, selling acid and going to different rainbow gatherings. And we were out in the desert, and I pick up this little rock, and I'm like, "Whoa, this rock could be worth so much money." I was like, "Whoa, look at this colored rock! Whoa, look at this one!" So I filled one painter bucket, right? Like a three
Right.
gallon painter bucket. I filled one, and I was living in a friend's house that had a 2-car garage that was empty. And then I stepped my game up to 3 buckets a night. And then I ended up filling this entire 2-car garage, like up to the fucking rafters with rocks.
And of course, none of them were worth anything, right?
Yeah, I went out one morning to roll a joint, and I looked over at this insane pile of rocks, like 2-car garage full. And I looked at a rock, and I was like, "This is just a shitty rock. It's just another shitty rock." So that's how I stopped doing dope.
Yeah. So my situation was not quite that, although I've had those sort of situations. Mine was I got some really, 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 really bad bathtub sort of meth, and it's one of those, like, you know, do a line, throw up, 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 like, and I did that for like 24 hours. Yeah. And my girlfriend, who became my first wife, was completely innocent. She had no idea what I was doing, right? Like, not a fucking clue. And she came over one night and she's like, "Hey," or one morning, I guess it was. And she came over and she's like, "Hey, let's go out and get some lunch." And I'm laying on the couch and I'm like, I can't move. Right? Like, I mean, I literally couldn't move. I was shaking and like, ugh. And she made me walk down the street. I was living up on Capitol Hill at the time in Seattle. And she made me go out and eat food. Right? Which is the last fucking thing you want when you're, you know, especially, you know, doing the whole like seizure sort of thing after that much meth. But she made me go eat food. And after that, I just stopped. I mean, that was it. I was like, okay, well, this is stupid. You know, like staying up for 24 hours and literally puking my fucking guts out every time I would take a hit. Right? Like, it's like, this is not life.
Yeah. Well, basically, same thing. I was dope sick. I went to Maui, Hawaii. I puked my guts out. I drank a bunch of Carlo Rossi hobo jugs of wine.
Oh, God.
And puked all my shit out of my system. And then I stopped being junkie, but then I have been an alcoholic since. So
right.
Like, so, you know, which sucks, because it's like you give up the needle, but then you have the bottle, and it's like,
right.
I'm slowly working on that.
You know, the problem with alcohol is, and I love my booze, man. I fucking love my booze. Is that it's legal, it's everywhere. And very few people will ever give you shit about it.
Yeah,
right?
But
like,
it's all about like what the fuck you want to do in your life, like whatever is like hindering you or elevating you.
Right. You know? No. And I'm trying to skip that part of the equation right now. It's more about like it's acceptable, right? Like putting a needle in your arm is never socially acceptable, right? Unless you're with like
unless you live in Alaska.
Well, okay, I want to get into Alaska a little bit too, because I have some friends from Anchorage and their stories are fucking mind blowing. You know, the amount of the amount of you know, drug abuse and alcohol abuse and whatnot is pretty fucking staggering. In fact, I used to think Seattle was bad, right, in regards to like drugs and alcohol, but it has nothing on Anchorage at all, like not even close. Actually, fuck it. Let's talk about that a little bit. So you grew up in Anchorage, right?
I grew up in Anchorage.
Okay.
Born and raised.
Yeah. So Anchorage to me is, and I think to a lot of Americans, even though obviously it's part of the U.S., seems like this exotic fucking place, like, you know, whatever. Because most of us will never go to Anchorage, right? We'll never go to Alaska.
It was the wild, wild west. So you had like you had the pipeline days in the 70s, 80s, which was just this huge gold rush of money, cocaine, booze, prostitutes, Hell's Angels. It was the wild, wild west. So like every bar has bullet holes in things. Over the years, it's become this extremely like sad, desolate place where, so a lot of in the small native villages up in around in Alaska, they kind of like a three strikes out rule, you're out, you know, if you fuck
Hmm.
up so many times. And so they keep on kicking out a lot of Alaska natives from their villages and sending them to Anchorage with a one-way ticket and like no plan. And so then there's like no plan set up for anybody who gets off the planes. And so Anchorage
Wow.
has just become this like insane. Like the whole city is a homeless camp. Like it's
Right.
fucked up. It's scary. It's sad, and like something has to happen. And
There's
so
a
we've been.
Yeah, there's a documentary I watched a few months ago about the opiate crisis in Anchorage, and it was really, really, really fascinating.
Oh yeah,
And
like I had a friend that was like trying to request a bed to get like off opiates, and they're like, "Yeah, we have one. We'll have one in a year and a half for you." I'm just like,
that's
yeah,
basically what the documentary was saying too. I mean, it was really fucking interesting and terrifying. But the worst part to me was watching all these people who are homeless in Anchorage. Like, of any city in the United States to be homeless, Anchorage would
right.
have to be the worst, as far as I'm concerned. Right? It's
Yeah,
cold. Well, that's
yeah,
it. It's cold.
yeah. It's not fun. Yeah, I mean, this is really a dark podcast.
Hey, you know
Yeah,
what?
like
No, we're just
well,
talking about shit.
you
Life
know,
is
like
dark, dude.
in every summer or every spring, you find a ton of frozen bodies. You know,
Right. Yeah.
but the whole point is just that there's no plan and effort plan in place to help out the homeless in Anchorage right now.
Mm-hmm.
So so I'm currently talking to some friends to try to like put a bigger platform on to help
Mm-hmm.
spotlight that right now. But we'll see what happens.
Well, actually, it's interesting. So after this, like maybe tomorrow or whatever, I'll hook you up with a good friend of mine who's down in Portland. Um, she's from Anchorage originally, native. Currently lives in Portland, but she's doing a lot of work with that sort of thing in Portland, but wants to kind of start doing more stuff in Alaska, where her family still is.
Oh,
So yeah, I definitely want to hook you two up because I think you did along really, really, really super well. And
always down to collaborate.
yeah, and that's another thing that happens in Alaska that does not happen anywhere else is the native issue, right? I mean, like obviously there are native people everywhere throughout the U.S. But it's not the same as it is in Alaska, right? Like I mean, it's
But
something.
reservations are reservations, and isolation is isolation, and small communities that are drug dependent, and a lot with Alaska is that you have. All right, so in Anchorage, what would go for $20 of cocaine or $20 worth of dope in Seattle goes for
Mm,
50 in Anchorage. So
right.
it's like it's all double priced and stuff, and then bootlegging communities, and then poisoning, and then especially like poisoning like the village communities. That's just like I've seen it my whole life. It's a long fucked up story, but
Yeah, no, no, and that's horrible stuff. So you're right. It is getting a little bit dark. So why don't we change gears just a little bit here? What do you see mythological horses like this year? Like, what are your plans for? Granted, the year is half over, but how do you see? What do you see mythological horses doing in the next, say, like 6 months or so?
probably being completely homeless.
Is so you mentioned
No
that a
kidding.
lot. No, I mean
No
you
kidding.
talk about that a
No,
lot, and
no,
I
it's a scary thought, but no, we're good. It was just a bad joke. We record the demos for our new album next weekend, and then we record the new album with Tad in Seattle in October.
okay,
And
cool. Do you have any shows
yeah,
lined up in Seattle in October or October,
we
November?
do. We have the weekend of Halloween. We have 3 shows: Tacoma, Seattle, and Shoreline lined up
Shoreline. Where are you going to play in Shoreline?
at Daryl's.
Oh, Oh, yeah, of course. Yeah, I like
And then
Daryl's.
um, yeah, yeah, and then we'll see. how the album gets released, So
Right.
I'm thankful that I won't be homeless for the release of the album because I have a home now, which is
Right.
pretty fucking cool. But that's just one of those worries. It's just like investing everything you fucking have and like
Right.
working really hard and then being on tour and then being like, okay, wow, I just got home from tour and there's all our pallets of records underneath the carport and then there's a sign on the door that says you're fucking evicted, get your shit out.
Yeah, no, and that's obviously not fun. Um, something just went.
And it happens. And it happens. That's what rock and roll is. So it's like, and then the mental illness of like continuing, like, it's just like, think of it as like a fish swimming upstream and just getting beat the whole time and stuff and like
Right.
having no support. So it's like continuing to like being like, oh, put an album out, that's failure. Put an album out, that's failure. Put an album out, that's failure. And then like continuing to do it is just that interesting topic of mental illness, going back to that.
Right. Okay, so I want to wrap up here fairly soon, but
Oh yeah.
one thing that you talk about over and over again. Well, now I'm wide awake. I took one of those alpha brain pills, so I'm like, yay! It's basically legal speed. One of the things you talk about all the time is homelessness, drug addiction.
Yeah, that's a huge theme of the band.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, and really, it's just the therapy of the band and the reality of the band.
Mm-hmm.
You can't sugarcoat playing 500 shows and using 499 different drum kits.
Right. So, actually, I'm kind of at a loss for words right there because that kind of sums it up a lot.
We're not a typical band. We're more of like me and Jess like being like, I mean, literally looking at Beavis and Butthead and putting a guitar and a drum with them and just like floating hopelessly through life.
Mm-hmm.
And hoping that, I don't know, not even hoping anymore.
I mean, if I were to call it a therapeutic art project, would that be somewhat valid?
If I didn't have a goal, I'd be
Mm-hmm.
dead, or in prison, or dead in prison, or
Yeah.
in prison and dead. So it's just like an endless goal. I feel like, and I'm thankful that me and Jess have like this endless goal,
Mm-hmm.
because if not, we would be fucked.
So what is the goal, Shawn? I mean, what is the end goal for Mythological Horses? Like, what is that goal?
Our end goal is simple: to have a farm or a big enough property where we can build yurts or tiny homes for our good friends who are completely fucked and dysfunctional in life and will be homeless in life.
Mm-hmm.
Like, and I'm there with that. I'm one of
Mm-hmm.
those. So it's kind of like not trying to build like a feral community, but a home for mythological horses.
Right.
A retirement stable community.
A tiny house
Horse-
village or something like that.
Horse stable community. The focus is just the point is to have a home, and then once we have a home, then just to continue working our asses off with music. If I won the lottery tomorrow, like $1 billion, all I would think about is what are we gonna do next with the band? So it's just like my brain's just fucking wired.
Yeah, and that's dedication, man. Dedication. We're almost up to the hour mark, but here's a couple of things that I have. I mean, I'm sure we could probably keep going forever, but
No, I need to go swim. I'm
yeah,
overheating.
okay. So there are two questions I always ask everyone, and a couple of them like nobody likes, but whatever, fuck you. I'm gonna ask them anyway. One is, and this is a question I hate being asked myself, so this is why I like to ask it. Who is your favorite band or bands? You can answer multiple if you want.
my favorite band
Yeah.
or band.
Yep.
Well, shit, I love all music. So,
Yep. Again, everyone hates this question, including me, which is why I ask it.
yeah, I mostly listen to classical music all day, but my favorite bands would be Godhead Stylo and the Dead Milkmen.
That's a really interesting combination, and actually makes perfect sense listening to mythological horse. Or I almost said horsemen, mythological horses. Yeah, that actually makes a lot of sense. Mythological horrors. Yeah, actually, that's a. You know what? You should do a side project called Mythological Horrors. That would be fun.
I have a side project called Be A Side. Look it up on YouTube.
Oh, I will definitely.
B-E-E aside. I don't know. It's funny.
I like that. I like
It's about
that.
the awareness. It's about the awareness of the death of bees.
All right.
All right,
You're
are
a
we-
fascinating
are we-
motherfucker. I have one last question for you, though. All right. And this is another one nobody likes to hear. What is something about Shawn Holley that nobody fucking knows? Well, besides the fact you like to put yourself in a picture frame. What is something really fucking bizarre about you? Which I know there's a lot, but pick one thing that.
Every time I hike a mountain, I masturbate on the top of the mountain.
Wow. So that's one I've never heard before.
That should be an easy one, but
Well, yeah. I mean, I don't think that's common.
you're closer to God. You're closer to God.
And
All
does
right,
that?
are we done?
Yeah, we're done, Sean. Hey, thank you so much, man. Stay on just for
All
a
right.
second. Other than that, we're done. Thank you, Sean.